Thank you, Stephen and Grania and Department of Communities for inviting me here today to tell us about our lovely project, Sanskriti. Sanskriti is the Indian word for heritage. And we have a lot of Sanskriti organizations in Indian Subcontinent. So I replicated that word here in Northern Ireland, and I think that Northern Ireland and India goes long back with their exchange of history, cultural and other backgrounds. ArtsEkta is the organization which is known for its cultural diversity through medium of arts, and we work with all cultures. But obviously, being an Indian and living here for last 41 years, I thought it was very important that my forefathers and my other generations of uncles and aunts who came and made Northern Ireland their home, that history should be explored, that history should be told and exchanged with the local communities. Hence, this project took place, which focused basically on cultural heritage of the Indian art forms and social memories. So that was very important for us because, as I said, that we are a cultural arts organization. The 3-year project was funded by Heritage Lottery Fund and the RAIN Foundation, and we got small pockets of monies from other small funders to do more exploratory work. And the themes were migration, trade, and industry, and the rites of passage. So those were the 3 themes which we chose, and we wanted to explore more and more about those 3 themes. So we partnered with very much of the professional organizations from heritage, cultural, historical, educational sectors, and these organizations, when we went and talked about what our project was all about, the support which we got was just immense, absolutely real good support, and we were delighted to hear that the interest these organizations and these institutions had for what we needed to offer. So for year 1, we explored the trade and migration, and it was in the depth. We explored the journeys of the first settlers of the Indian community, working life, family life, and what was it like leaving home, and why did they come here? Why did they choose Northern Ireland when it was in conflict? It had its dark history. Why did they come here? So these were all the explorations which was done through the trade and migration and the journeys of these first settlers. So what we did was we partnered with Queen's University and had 15 volunteers and the Historical Society as well. We got 15 volunteers who were studying history and oral history programs. So they went to all these Indian households, the first settlers in Northern Ireland, and that started from 1949. When the first settler came in Northern Ireland. India got its independence in 1947, and after that the migration from Indian Subcontinent started. And I'm sure it happened before that. As you all know, through East India Company, there was a lot of people who came from Indian Subcontinent for trade and for industries. And after that, it was in 1960s when there was a whole influx of Indian migration took place, and they all went to different cities of UK. But 1949 was the first settler who came here from a small village of Punjab, and that's North India. And one of those settlers was my father-in-law, who came and made, he landed up by accidentally to Northern Ireland. He thought that he was going to Southampton on the boat, but it happened to be that he was in Belfast docks. And that's where the story began. And there were two friends, and they started their life here and settled in County Tyrone. How did they landed there? Maybe on their bikes or whatever. But that's how the story began. So the it was 1949, and that is the story of my own father-in-law and his friend. And there was the Hindu community and the Sikh community who came and settled here. So those 14 to 15 volunteers were very well trained, and they went and did their interviews. We did a proper questionnaire for them, and they transcribed those interviews, and then it was all brought back to the museums and Queen's University. So Peter Carson was the name which rings bell. He was absolutely amazing person who helped us to transcribe these, and they were the materials that were kept in Ulster Folk and Transport Museum, and they're being archived there. There are total of 459 interviews of different people who you can hear and at the Ulster Folk Transport Museum. So the first phase was a learning curve for myself and the project manager who was there as well. And we built such a good relationships with, again, Ulster Folk Transport Museum, Healing Through Remembering, Dr. Michelle Maloney, James Mackey. I'm sure you have heard of Mackey's, who had fantastic industries, which they did import and export, and employed a lot of people from local communities in their factories. And the over 50s Asian community, again, some of them came in 1940s, some of them came in 50s, and some of them came in 60s. So there has been a whole combination of that first generation who settled all over Northern Ireland. But the main ones which we took was from Coleraine, because there was quite a few families who were settled in Coleraine in those days, and they still are, and the Sikh Gurdwara. Now, Irish linen industry had a fantastic relationship of trade and industry migration with India as well, because linen is one of the biggest exporters in India in those days, and Irish linen had that little bit of import and export going, and the Darjeeling tea companies, I'm sure you have heard of those as well. So those were the main industries of trade which had the connections of the local main businesses connected to the Indian industries. So there was quite a few links of the trade and migrations through all those things. Right, okay, sorry. Then the year 2 was the cultural exchange. And this was specifically linked to between the South Asian community and the local community, which was also very, very important for us. The contribution which the Indian community had done through making their own lives here, and being the part of the society. And I know that at that time there was conflict and there was no word of racism. So the Indian people who were doing the marketing trade or the clothing trade were welcomed by open arms by the farmers and the rural community. So South Asian cultural was very, very well received here in Northern Ireland through the local, specifically the rural communities, which still sing the praises of the Indian community, that how welcoming they were. Many females who came and settled here had very little English, but they learnt a couple of words, and that was through the words which they needed to use in their business skills, and that was, sorry, I don't have the item or the garment. Thank you for purchasing this item, and see you next time. And those were the three words which got them everywhere in Northern Ireland on their bikes, and they were hard-working people. So there was very interesting work which we did with, again, the museums, National Museums NI, Remnants NI, and Dr. Michelle Maloney plays a very important role for us in that there, who set up all these exchanges and did a lot of research for us. Where were these Indian children who were born by the first generation, which schools they were going to, where they were being educated, and what were they doing in those days. So the schools and the community groups, there was a real exchange, and again the oral history was taken place, and the interviews were done by these volunteers. And the second year then we produced an exhibition of the second generation Indians and the local community exchanges, which was called Adita. And that travelled quite a few places. And I still rings bell to me that Shankill and East Belfast had lots and lots of connections with the Indian communities, again because those industries of the shipping yard industries and the trade industries, linen industry and all that. So a lot of people were working in those industries from the Indian background of the second generation and also from the local communities. So we have a real history in Shankill area and in the East Belfast area of the Indians' second settlers. So there was a lot of exchange done and a lot of fantastic historical projects, which you will see. Some of the exhibition tells you that and shows you that. So second year was absolutely a fantastic year for us. Then the third year came, and it was about the cultural rites of passage. And what was that all about? And that was all about birth, marriage, death, and how the Indian community has lost that because we were so enthralled in education, building those communication skills, building our own businesses, and living the life as norm as what the local community would be living. So we were forgetting all about our all those sort of areas which was very important for us. So in 1981, Indian Community Centre was born, and in that the Indian community from all generations got together to talk about what are our rights where birth is concerned, what are our rights in which marriages are concerned, because obviously the Indian population though it was growing, but it was shrinking as well. Because of the conflict and because of a lot of other reasons, people of the second generation were migrating from here. They were making maybe Manchester, London, England, other areas, or Canada, US, their home places. There were quite a lot of migration which was taking place from here, and we lost quite a lot of our population. But whatever was left of the first generation, they wanted to preserve. So again, we started to do a lot of work in the Indian Community Centre to preserve that. And it is a beautiful place to go if you have never been in there. I think it is the place to go and see our lovely altar and the history of the Indian people, especially living in Belfast. So I would say you must go and see that place. And again, the groups, the local groups and the Indian groups, they got involved through medium of food, festivals and celebrations to talk about their journeys and their views about how they have lost their own identity, and to keep that going. And there was everybody took that pride and said we need to preserve that. So there was a little booklet, again Indian Community Centre produced a booklet, and then there was with the help of Community Relations Council, we also produced a book called The Irish Raj. So if anybody ever gets a hand to that there, it can tell you the connections which India had with the whole island of Ireland through missionaries and through other supports as well. So there was a whole huge collection of the items and the objects which were collected in our cultural rites of passage, and we produced a fantastic tour guide which is still available, and to see where Indian people left their legacy through working with trade and migration. And it is a self-guided tour. You just need a leaflet and go and see the connections which Indian people of the first generation have left, and before the first generation as well, the connections which we had with Northern Ireland, especially with our Irish linen, Sirocco works, Mackies, and the harbour. It is very, very interesting tour. We also produced educational resources. So it was very important that we were doing this work with the schools and community groups and all that sort of stuff. So we just didn't want to leave, giving a lecture or giving one little, talk about Indian culture, but we wanted to each classroom to explore about Indian society and Indian heritage. So there was a loan boxes which were produced by ArtsEkta, and the schools and the museums and libraries could borrow those for educational resource for people to learn more about Indian history. So the overall project was a success, absolutely a success. And if I get a funding again to do it, I will do it again. But unfortunately, Heritage Lottery only gives you funding for one project. We've done it, we have explored it, and there is a huge legacy left behind with this 3-year project. So overall in this project, we had 600 participants from all walks of life who contributed, who participated in our short programs, and we had 200 volunteers who took pride in being part of our overall project. And we have 59 oral history recordings We have a couple of videos which we have also sort of made, and we have a dedicated website for Sanskriti as well. And till today, I'm not too sure how many are going to visit with PRONI and how many visited in Down Museum, but before that, I would say by December 2017, we had 15,000 people who have visited our exhibition and have wrote comments on our books, which what they have learned, what they thought of the exhibition, and how proud they were that we were part of their society. So there has been a huge legacy left behind, and we may continue on. And in that also we have built fantastic relationships and fantastic projects. And I would like to thank one person who is sitting in this room, and she is Alison Patrick, who was absolutely amazing in giving us the support of her childhood and her father's days in India, and a lot of objects and a lot of pictures and a lot of loving memories were donated to us by Alison. So I'm just going to show you a small video.
Hey, as you say, Alison Patrick. My link is with my father. He went out to India in 1928. He worked then for Sirocco Works. He had gone to Innsbruck for here. I think he didn't make much of his education. He was a bit lazy at school, and he joined in Sirocco Works at 16 and became an engineer. And you probably know there were links with Indian Sirocco Works, because the founder of Sirocco Works was very closely linked with some of the tea plantations out there. And Sir Samuel Davison, he was called, went out to India as a boy in 1718, many years ago, and was a great innovator, an inventor. And he actually invented some of the drying machine, all the drying machines that were used in the industry. So that's where the Sirocco and the Indian link is. So my father was 24, and Belfast in 1928 was probably quite a grim place, I think. He was the oldest of 6. His mother died when he was 14 or 15, and I think it sounded great. The opportunity to go to India was quite exciting. It amazes me always because, in those days, nobody would have known what India was like. There was no internet, TV, and the photographs that they had would have been very simple things, so it took quite a lot of bravery, I think, to say, yes, I will go to India. So we did go, and he went. It took about 5 weeks, I think, in the ship. And long afterwards, when my mother died, I found that he had had a diary that he had kept, which you've seen, of his trip, which I think is very interesting. It's a kind of historical document, because it describes how they left and how he felt. And he'd never been further away than Manchester before, so we imagine what that was like. And they went down to Biscay, and people were sick, but he wasn't. And then as they got further and further south, it got hotter and hotter, and they began to sleep out on deck. And the games that they played on board, I just thought it was fascinating. And going through the Red Sea, and then finally getting to India 5.5 weeks afterwards. They went up the river Hooghly, I think that's where they entered to Calcutta, and he described very clearly the excitement of the people on board when they saw people they knew, etc. So he arrived there and went in a train, and presumably, I didn't say much about that, but the only way up north then, because he was going up to Assam, and that was now to the Moran Company. And I think the only way up would have been by train. They couldn't have flown in those days. And in those days, you only got home if you were in a tea planter. Now, he went out as what was called an assistant engineer. That was his role. But basically, it was all about tea, you can imagine. So they were only able to get home every 5 years. It's amazing, really. Think of going away and knowing you're not going to get back for 5 years. But you can understand if it took 5 weeks to get home, maybe that as well. But I think they were treated, not exactly harshly, but there weren't too many luxuries or not too much money spent on them, So after 5 years, he came back on his first leave, and they got 6 months leave in 1933. And he was only a young man. He was born in 1904, so he was 28 in those days, quite young. So I think one of the purposes of him coming home for those leaves was to find himself wives, I'm sure. And it did happen. I mean, there are numerous stories of planters coming home and meeting women, getting married, and going back out again, in a short period of time. And there was one excellent story of one of the planters, I don't know which one it was, who was quite a sort of stiff kind of guy, and the only way he could find himself a wife was to sit outside a girls' school and pick one of them going in, and he went in and asked my headmistress if he'd meet her, and he didn't marry her. Actually, he did. I don't know which one it was, and the suspicions were not quite sure what his name was. That was what I did. So he didn't meet anybody after 33. Back out to India again, and as I say, conditions were quite harsh, I think, and also healthcare was very poor. I mean, they would have got malaria, and they got dysentery, and there was typhoid, all sorts of things. Pretty grim, really.
Serious illnesses as well.
What's right?
Serious?
Serious, yeah. I mean, he did have, dysentery, and even I think, because you can carry that in you for a long time. I mean, he had various episodes of that throughout his life, and also later on when he had a cold, he always thought he had to touch it there. And he had problems, so it was no picnic really, I think. So anyway, back out to India in 1933, 5 more years, came back in 1938. And just towards the end of the time, he had 19 days to go until he was due to go back. They used to go out to India in October, because that was the beginning of the cool season. So they would come home over the summer when it was hot out there, cooler here, and then go back out there. So he was due to go back out on 13th of October. And in September, he met my mother. 19 days before he went away. He was on holiday, he met her on holiday in Port Rush of all places. And she had gone up there to help out a friend who was running something up there, so the B&B. And he said the first time he ever saw her, she had a hoover in her hand, and it was a big cleaner, so he thought it was quite fun. So they went about each other, and they must have fallen in love. And when I think of my parents now, it is so out of character, really, because they seem to me to be terribly conservative Presbyterians, Okay. But anyway, they must have fallen in love. He went and asked her father for her hand, and I'd love to have heard that conversation, because father was quite a sort of stiff, shy man, And anyway, the answer must have been yes, because they got engaged. He went back out to India, he had to go back in October, and the idea was that she would follow him out. However, it didn't happen, because obviously the war came in 1939, and also I think the main reason was her parents didn't want her to go.
Right.
I think that was the main reason, because as I say, it just was a bridge too far from and she'd be very beaten to her parents.
Okay.
He had booked her passages, as they called them, out in ships that she couldn't take up, and there were other people going to and fro. I mean, the war didn't stop all of the traffic back and forth. I mean, there were women actually did go out, but mother didn't go out. But the interesting thing to me is that they corresponded for the entire duration of the war, from 1938, end of 1938 to the beginning of 1946. So they'd known each other for 3 weeks, and they waited for 7 or 8 years.
That is romance.
So and then she kept those letters. Which again I only found after she died, and I went through them all, and believe me, tears were tripping me, it was, because they were romantic letters at the start anyway, which you just don't see your parents in that light really, I don't think. And then he got more disappointed, you could tell, as time was going on, and at times he didn't know where she was. He booked her passages and she wasn't on the ship, all kinds of things. But it gives a bit of insight into life there. I think that the war times out there, it was different from here, because they weren't being bombed or anything, but the Japanese threat was the big issue. And the tea planters, they had a volunteer force, a bit like sort of dogs and all that. That's a bit crude maybe. It was called the AVLH, the Assam Valley Light Horse. The picture of from here actually. I don't know where he is in it. There's a picture of the Assam Valley Light Horse there in 1934, I think. There you are.
That's fantastic. So you would have volunteered for this then?
Yes, I think we all did, because there wasn't much else to do really. Well, life must have been pretty boring, I think. It was work and nothing much else. So he must be in there somewhere. I can't pick him out, I have to say.
uniforms and everything.
Yes, and
that heat.
and obviously rifles as well, you know, and he got hit on the head with a rifle butt, and he got cataracts later on and making things from that. But anyway, so where I got to, oh yes, that's at the wartime. Quite a few of the planters would have joined up. You know, two of them, yes, that's right. Sidney Hare and Pat Kirkwood. Sidney Hare joined the RAF and was killed, and Pat Kirkwood joined and served in there and was taken to Singapore, for Singapore, and was prisoner of war. But my father stayed on, but there were fewer people working on the plantations then. I mean, there were very few British people working, so they had to work quite hard, as you can imagine. But one thing that's significant is the planters helped to build, there was a road built out of Burma to facilitate the exit of the British forces from Burma. You know, the Japanese were moving over to the west. So he was pretty busy there on the Manipur Road. It was called MANIPUR, Manipur Road. And quite a few planters would have helped to build that. And it meant it was 1 year, 1942, when he didn't correspond with them for 3 months because he was there. I mean, you know, that was happening. I think it was in 1944. And I was going through his letters and made a few notes of things that were significant. I think it was about them, yeah. So, I think the wartime was a bit strange there. And then they had Americans, they had a base somewhere nearby, so Americans would have come over to the plantation, which was quite entertaining for the people. And some of the British forces as well. I had an uncle in the army in the Skillings, and he was in India at one point, but it was such a long way away they couldn't meet each other. Yes. You know, so it was strange, and I think also communications began to be quite slow, you know, letters to and from, but they continued writing with my father. The tea plantations, how can I describe them? There were times of the year when they were very, very busy, you know, very busy depending on the crops, and they would start at work at 4 a.m. and that kind of thing. But there were other times of the year when they weren't very busy. And their free time, there was nothing for them to do, really, the planters, so the only thing they did actually was play polo. There's a big thing out there, polo, because it had started up there in Assam. That was the birthplace of polo, and in Manipur, yes, was the birthplace of polo. So they all played polo, and they all had horses, and they travelled around the tea estates on their horses. They called them ponies, but they were really horses, and they imported them in from Australia. So when he went in, he said he'd really not been on a horse before. He'd been on a horse on his grandfather's farm, an old farm horse. So when he went out there, they said, "Bill, can you ride?" You know, well, I've been on a horse before. So he said that he got on the horse. Somebody hit the horse around the back end of the slide, and the horse took off and he galloped and after he could ride. But nobody taught him. They just got on and sort of went. And the centre of their activities was a sort of club, I think, a polo club as it was called. It was like a social club, and it's still there to this day, as I can call it. Entirely white, you know, no Indians at all. Okay, and that's all changed, of course. So all of the planters were socialised there, and they had teas and buns, and when my mother went out, she would have cooked for them, that sort of thing. So that was their social life. When there was just one night a week, I think they went to the club, and then the other nights they went to each other's homes or bungalows, and they'd have had meals at each other's bungalows, and a wee bit of golf. There was a wee bit of golf here, and there was not very much, you know, it was pretty crude, I think.
Yes.
So what else would you like to know about the work of the estate, really? He was there as an engineer, as I say, to support the structural works, yeah.
His day-to-day role has been then, would he have been managing?
Yes, well, he became the manager of it. As an engineer, he would have been responsible for the machinery, obviously, yeah. So the structural machinery, and some of it's still there, it's still going strong. I've got photographs of it. In fact, I was in Malaysia a few years ago, and I saw some there, which was probably 100 years old. So it does last, you know, for this long. There were dryers, you know, they dried the leaf. Up to the invention of these machines, they were drying it for charcoal. It's actually not a terribly complex process. It's very simple: pick it and dry and chop it and pack it. You know, it's not a complicated process. It's not as complicated as making cigarettes, for instance. It's much easier than that. So his job would have been to be responsible for all the machinery, but he became manager then. was mainly been responsible for the whole garden. And usually they would have had 2 or 3 gardens in the company. I think the Moran company that he worked for had a number of tea gardens. One was called Sepon, S-E-P-O-N, and each of the gardens was divided into different areas, like Anguri, Tekarai, Taliban, the other names, you know. So that would be, and then they'd be responsible also for the workers, you know, for providing their housing, etc., and paying them and all that sort of thing, and putting entertainments on for them and that kind of thing.
Right. So this is the little oral history recording which we did with Alison. It is available on our website, and we have 58 more of those type of things which you will hear not only the local community who was a part of the Indian subcontinent, but also from the Indian community who made Northern Ireland and who still have Northern Ireland as their first home after leaving their country. So it has been an interesting journey for all of us, and I can only thank Heritage Lottery and the museums, the libraries, the educational institutions, and many others who have contributed in this. And I also particularly would like to thank Roe Valley, who put our exhibition, and they were amazing. The amount of work which they did with the local community, because Limavady was one of the places where the Indian community went and settled in the early days, and there are still few of them left there of the first generation. Unfortunately, we are losing our first generation very quick and fast, but the legacy which they left is always to be remembered. And you can see more on our website, or you can go to Ulster Folk and Transport Museum, where you will be able to hear these transcriptions. And from here we will be going to Leadenhall Library and many other libraries, and I have also been asked for this to go to Dublin for a couple of months. So yeah, it is interesting, and we are proud that we did this. So if anybody has any questions, I'm very happy and I'm very glad to answer. I think we have another couple of more minutes to go.